Welcome to Wisco Dice. Hey, yo, folks, it's Conesy with the Most. I'm here again. We're doing more video content. You can expect to see more of this, continuing this progress. So, on today's video, we're going to go ahead and paint the pants on World War II US Infantry. Now, I'm gonna do it's gonna be a kind of a leather tan, not quite as green as what's in these pictures. The colors can vary a little bit. I really like the way they end up, the finished look ends up being on a miniature. You can see the nice little bit of contrast there. It's maybe not quite 100% the same as the way Warlord paints it. You can find photos where the uniforms go a little bit more to the brown, a little bit less. I just happen to like this. It's more of an aesthetic choice than a historical choice, although it's at least close enough to history to be right. So you can get kind of an idea what the finished model is going to look like. I'm blocking off all my light, but yeah, you can get the idea anyways. So anyways, you can also go to the website and catch up on all of those painting videos. Uh, but yes, this is going to be Warlord Games, Bolt Action, they're US Infantry. These are actually not this sprue. I am building those currently. These are the older US Infantry sprues, so the models and sculpts will be slightly different than the newer ones. These are the original ones that came out with. So I'm going to choose this guy in particular just because I think he's going to be easy for the video to pick up. And so I also paint almost exclusively with Reaper paint. So I'm going to start with 09127 Uniform Brown. I will do some shading with the 09245 Basic Dirt. And then I'll blend a little bit of that Uniform Brown with 09030 Leather Brown to bring up my highlights. Historicals I don't find need to have drastic highlights, but you do want to pick up the color just a little bit. So we'll start with that leather brown and just get a base coat. Now this is all over a white primer. You could use whatever primer you really want. You could do some Zenithal if you really wanted. I don't really buy into it. I've never had great success or noticed a huge difference other than it helps me maybe understand where the highlights should be. Putting in these base coats is really super simple. You just you don't have to worry super about accuracy, just get it on the model so that you have a good coat. Now with the Reaper paints, I probably will find myself putting a second coat after the first, just to get a nice even coat of color down. The paints come pretty nicely thin, so you notice I didn't actually thin any of my paint with water here. These paints are, I just put them on my wet palette to the side, and they're pretty thin, just straight out of the out of the bottle. So I'll just go ahead, since we're waiting for that to dry, we'll go ahead and do a couple more, base coat them in. This is exciting stuff here. We're watching the base coats and models. All right. So for this army I'm working on, I've got, as of today, I have 16 of them finished. 16 infantry. I need about 70 infantry model, and this is going to be, the theme of this army is going to be a early war U.S. infantry that invaded the U.S. 1st Infantry Division that invaded Sicily in 1943. The inspiration of this, and the only reason I've done this, is where I grew up here in Wisconsin. It's very close to a little tourist town called Wisconsin Dells. And in the Wisconsin Dells, there is a attraction for World War II ducks, the Duck W's. These are the original ones, the ones that are painted green that are in the Dells, are actually not modified at all, other than just some slight modifications for to keep the tourists safe. So you can see the paint isn't quite when it's setting up. It's not quite getting a nice thick coat on this particular model. We'll go ahead and paint that in some more. So in the Dells, there's those ducks, and when Warlord released their Duck W model, which I have built, and I will at some point do some kind of content regarding how I painted it. I don't know if that'll be video or not, but see how those things go. The ducks were always one of my favorite attractions and rides in the Dells. So when Warlord came out with the Duck W, I immediately had to, that was the kind of the signal that I had to build an army around the Duck W, and it's taken a while. I had the Duck for a while, and I hadn't really figured out what I wanted to do with it. I've been very busy on some other miniatures games, so particularly the Batman miniatures game from Night Models, which is excellent and I highly recommend. But I wanted to build this army around that, so with early war, and this is going to be kind of a coastal invasion army is kind of the theme. So it's they're coming on from the sea, and taking the land and coming in close to a town. I wanted them to basically be largely rifle squads. It's early war, so the squads should be near full in size for the most part throughout the army. Not a lot of heavy weapons. They would not have been necessarily expecting a lot of tanks, or they had tank support coming in on ground. So, all right, we do need to wait for this to dry. So we'll just give that a moment, and then when that dries, we'll go ahead and do the next coat, which will be the with the basic dirt. Alright, and we're back. So now I'm going to go ahead with a much smaller brush. So I started out doing the base coats with the Winsor Newton Series 7 number 1 brush. It's a fairly big brush, but I'm going to drop down to the 000 Winsor Newton. You can just see the difference in size on those two brushes there, right? So real obvious difference in size. I want to, as I go in and do this dark brown coat, I will wet my brush just a little bit, even though I'm using the wet palette. And then what I'm trying to do is just pick out where it's going to be darker. So all of these creases, I will just go in and I'm just trying to pick it out and make those spots, give them some depth. I'm also going to paint in around this little thing here, this little strap, and then right underneath where the next color will start, I want that also to be a deeper shade. It is a little bit shaded between, where that green tunic will ultimately go, so I want that to be shaded. And the accuracy isn't 100% necessary here. If you slop over a little bit, it's not a big deal. Just and this is, you could, why aren't you going with a wash here? It'd be so much faster. It might, but I tend to, with a wash, tend to have a bunch of pooling, so then I feel like I have to go back and clean it up. And I do use washes, but I've limited really what washes I use to the soft body black wash from Secret Weapon, and their armor wash from Secret Weapon as well, just because I like what those two washes do from an effects kind of perspective. I do manufacture kind of my own washes sometimes using some medium that I have. I know it's really popular for a lot of people to use, like GW's Lamia medium to use and add to a thin paint. That's really not my style myself, but I know a lot of people that do it. It works well. I actually have a medium that I use. From Liquitex, it's relatively lower cost. All right, and basically, a little bit up here under the crotch of the model, the inside of the leg, just kind of shade that in. And there's going to be a huge contrast in colors at this point, right? So that's not such a big a deal, okay? So now what we're going to do is clean off the brush. And then we're going to actually change brushes once again to my standard. I've used this brush so much it's actually worn right off. So I went from the 000. This is actually a 0, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. I've used this. Yep, it's a 0. I've used this particular brush. The lettering is actually worn off, but this is another Winsor Newton brush, which just goes to show what the quality of the brush. But you can see the difference in the size there. This one's a little bit bigger, but it's not nearly as big as that original one that I used for the base coat. So you can see just the size comparison there. All right, so I'm gonna grab just a touch of water, and then I've got some of this original uniform brown on the palette, and I'm going to grab just a little bit of this leather brown, and we're just going to mix those together until we get a shade that's distinctly a little more yellow than it was originally. And then we're going to touch the knees. Actually, I feel like I got a little bit too much paint on my brush. We'll touch the knees. And we're just going to work this kind of into the model and into color here until I get shades and highlights kind of where I want them. So this paint right now is actually really thin. If you need to thin it a little bit to get it really thin, you could go for it. You could add a little bit of like blending medium here. I am a fan of doing that, but I have not done it particularly on these. I'm trying to just make this an easy way to paint these models. Cover this part of his rear, kind of here. There'd be a little bit of a poof here. Try to hit some of these raised areas as well, because it'll give you a little more feel of being raised. And it's going to look, when you brush it on immediately, it's going to look a little brighter than the paint actually is. So don't be afraid of that, because it will dry a little bit darker than when you paint it on initially. And this is because it's so thin, it's drying really fast. So you can really start to see the finished effect. And even though that some of these spots are a bit underneath the model, I'm still just touching them just a little bit, because it will help with some of that shading and blend of the darker creases with the lighter ones. And there you pretty much go. It's done. Hopefully that turns out good and you can see what I did, but it's a super simple method to paint the pants and get them done with just the 3 colors. Easily able to be picked up. Now you could, if you didn't have these exact colors, the one color I would definitely go with is the uniform brown, because that's your base color. But you could use almost any yellow or yellowy leather color to mix with the uniform brown, and any darker brown for the recesses. You don't have to match those, just the one color. And heck, I could have even gotten away with maybe using a little black to mix this down and a little white to highlight it to get the varying shading if I really wanted to. I think the yellow in this leather brown does it actually a much better job of kind of getting the ultimate shade I wanted to get. So hopefully that was useful for you. You can see how to do that from a technique perspective. I'm going to go ahead and finish up these other two guys, and in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments or any feedback, reach out to us. We would love to hear it. We are available on all of our social media, whether that's Facebook, Twitter, or Pinterest. But if you or Instagram, but if you have any other questions, make sure you reach out. Let us know, or let us know below in the comments. And if you like what we're doing here, please give us a like, subscribe. We want to go ahead and make this something that our fans do enjoy. And until next time, peace out.